Kevin, thank you. Tonight, we're learning new information about the criminal investigation into employees at Sun Prairie West High School.
The former principal is now facing 2 counts of failure to report child abuse by a school administrator.
WMTV's Ashley Wheel was at tonight's press conference with police and joins us live in studio with details on what the investigation found.
Police detailed that the first charge comes from an incident in April of last year involving Sun Prairie West High School's former dean of students, Robert Gilkey-Meisegeier, who is currently facing child porn and sexual exploitation charges. The second comes from a separate situation in January 2025 with a different teacher who allegedly touched and had sexual conversations with students at West High School. Police say that the principal failed to properly report both incidents.
Right now, I'm sitting in just like overwhelming sadness that the adults didn't behave better.
That's how some parents are feeling after the announcement that Sun Prairie Police completed their investigation and have filed charges against the school's former principal.
My overall feeling is just a sense of sadness.
Lisa Goldsberry is a parent in the district and a former school board member.
This is not reflective of the district as a whole, but it does speak to a culture that has been created that we need to now go in and clean up and fix.
We have excellent teachers, paraprofessionals, and school staff who care deeply for the students who serve this community with integrity every day.
As a parent himself, Police Chief Kevin Wark says he feels the weight of the situation and says the incidents do not define the community.
Kids are our most prized possession, and it's hard not to rationalize a situation like this, especially as a parent myself, and I speak for the parents in this community.
The investigation began after the school's former dean of students, Robert Gilkey-Meisegeier, was arrested in July of last year after police learned of an incident in April. On Friday, police said former principal Jennifer Pluger failed to report 2 separate incidents of child abuse.
Parents must know that their children are safe at school. Students must know adults will act when concerns arise.
We completely disagree that there was any wrongdoing. We agree with the independent investigator's conclusion that there were no mandatory reporting violations on the part of Ms. Pluger.
Pluger's attorney said on Friday that they plan to fight these charges and claim she is innocent.
I can tell you that Ms. Pluger, who is a longtime public servant, had her heart in the right place and obviously did not commit intentionally any sort of failure to report child abuse. She was working hard and diligent, as she always does.
Pluger's attorney says the law requires that the person being charged has to have intentionally not reported the abuse. As of tonight, there are no online court records published for Pluger. Live in studio, Ashley Wheel, WMTV 15 News.
Ashley, thank you. In addition to the charges against Principal Pluger, police also referred charges against the school's HR director, but the DA has decided not to charge him after reviewing evidence. Police say the criminal investigation is complete and no additional criminal charges are expected. We've been following this story for months now, and we want to break down a timeline of what we know. In April of 2025, a tip was submitted about Gilkey-Meisegeier's behavior, and he was placed on leave. A few days later, the district's HR department found no evidence of inappropriate relationships, and he went back to work. Over the next few months, Gilkey-Meisegeier heard rumors of sex acts involving students and other staff, but did not report them, leading him to be placed on leave for not reporting. On July 24th, Sun Prairie Police arrested him after detailing digital evidence. On August 27th, he was indicted on federal charges. As Gilkey-Meisegeier went through court, on September 4th, the associate principal stepped in as acting principal. Then on the 16th, Peg Shoemaker was announced as the new acting principal. Finally, this past Tuesday, the Sun Prairie School Board released their independent investigation and said Jennifer Pluger will not be returning to the district.